So I've had to do some research lately in the development of fortifications in classical Greece. So I love strategy games. I grew up on the darn thing. So I was really interested to see how Greeks were designing their fortifications. I was particularly interested in the classical era since a lot of the siege techniques that we know from periods throughout history weren't really being used. Either they hadn't been invented yet, or the Greeks were simply not using them at all. So I get some books, I go over them to give myself an overall understanding of the story of the development of fortifications, and I come to realize that perhaps ancient Greeks aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. I know some of my friends from school are watching, so I'm sorry guys, but I'm gonna have to give some backstory. So, for those of you who don't know, the Greek mainland used to be inhabited by a civilization called the Mycenaeans, who themselves built some pretty hefty fortifications. The most famous one is Mycenae, with its fortifications built on top of a hill, accessible only through a tiny ramp that goes right to the gate, and the pièce de résistance. The walls, made of blocks bigger than a man, was 7 meters thick at its thinnest point. Damn, he thick! The design overall wasn't terribly sophisticated. There was no towers, no bastions. Actually, I got this a bit wrong. In fact, the narrow ramp was less fortified than it is. It's probably more something like that, about this long. It's really just enough to shoot anyone trying to knock down the door. Because it was so thick, it was strong. And, well, because it was strong, it outlived the people who made it. By, thousands of years, which maybe that's bad state expenditure, but I mean, it's cool as shit. Now you can't tell this because I've been sipping the tea behind the camera, but it is time for a refill. Mustn't forget the cream. The Bronze Age collapse comes along and the Mycenaean civilization is destroyed. Everyone becomes poor, stupid, and illiterate for the next few hundred years. Gosh darn it, I got fucking chalk on my goddamn pants. Fortifications coming out of the Dark Ages are made of mud brick because they're too poor to even imitate the remaining Mycenaean fortifications. Basically what I'm saying is the greatest threat to the defense of any city in Greece is the rain. Fantastic. Now, I am somewhat joking. They did take care to make sure that the mud brick wasn't exposed directly to the rain. They did shield them. But of course, that's only the beginning of the problems with using mud brick as a fortification material. Now, mud brick does go through a hardening process, which does make it stronger. But of course, you can only make mud so strong. But I mean, the weakness of mud brick didn't really matter since, along with fortifications being kind of shit, so was siege warfare. Basically, nobody knew how to take walled cities. All they did was hope that you would starve to death. But then someone finally got smart enough and realized that putting battering rams inside of shelters is a really good idea. Normally, when you picture battering rams, you're picturing them bashing some poor guy's door down, you know? Because wood is softer than stone. Well, unfortunately, when your entire wall is made of mud brick, your whole wall is something soft. To put it simply, your battering ram, yeah, it could push down any old part of the wall it wanted to. It didn't matter. Oh, yeah. Divine. Once that happened, the people who make walls were like, oh man, real shit, we gotta start doing more than the bare minimum. So they started making walls out of stone. And they had to start putting some, design into their walls. More than just putting walls around the city and making a door so you can get out. Now they had to start borrowing good ideas from their neighbors. Complex ideas like towers and outcroppings, and sometimes these zigzaggies that, Eastern forts like to have. And also, they needed to start making them thicker. These new developments in fortifications would not only make the walls stronger so that you couldn't just knock any old part of it down, but it would also give them unique firing positions so that they could shoot the people in the sheltered battering rams. So you couldn't just walk up to the wall and bash down the door, or build a dirt ramp for climbing the wall, or put a ladder up. You could actually shoot them comfortably from your fort. The Persians came, people who actually knew how to siege a city. They sacked a bunch of places, destroyed a bunch of things. They lost and got a bloody nose for it, but everyone learned a lesson. That valuable lesson is that walls are pretty freaking great. The funny thing is, when the Persians went running off, so too did the only group of people who actually knew how to siege a city. And so the people in cities are like, you're telling me that if I build a wall, there's nobody around who actually knows how to get through it. Well shit, I'm gonna build some darn walls. Basically, it became a really good investment to have walls, since if you just built them, your city was basically untouchable with the current technology level. Athens, in its war with Sparta, had built a wall all the way around its city, had built a wall all the way to the coastal port, and had built a wall all the way around that. So for all the ravaging and looting that the Spartans did all over Attica, Athens was always able to feed itself because it could always bring in food from the port and never worry about Sparta breaking in through those damn nice walls. Unfortunately for Athens, walls won't protect you from casualties at sea, plague, or bankruptcy. Fantastic. But then Greeks started learning more things from other people, like siege towers, which were useful for shooting down on anyone trying to hold down a wall. Siege towers mounted with battering rams. Siege towers mounted with, gangway ramps, so you could cross onto the wall and take their fortifications. Some Greeks managed to swallow their pride around ranged combat and finally started using the catapult, which could break down a wall from a distance. Some people even got smart enough to start putting them onto siege towers. Improve, adapt, overcome. It's at this point that siege technology pretty much outweighed any sort of defensive technology anyone had. My research described it that by the time of Alexander, when they did their conquest in Persia, they were able to siege out cities at an industrial rate. If you've ever played Total War, you probably know what that feels like. You set up your guys, you set up your siege craft, you bombard the place, you kill everyone who remains, bing, bang, boom, victory.